There's a certain kind of person who, in the middle of an argument, suddenly stops defending themselves, not because they were wrong, not because they ran out of things to say, but because something inside them quietly decided that keeping the peace was more important than being right. They swallow the rest of the sentence. They soften their tone, and later, alone, they replay the whole thing and wonder why they always end up here. If that felt familiar, stay with this. Most people around this kind of person don't fully understand them. They get called easygoing or selfless or even a pushover, depending on who's doing the labeling. Some people admire them, others take advantage without even realizing it. And what rarely gets said out loud is this: the person doing the compromising is often exhausted, quietly, persistently exhausted, in a way they can't fully explain even to themselves. They're not weak, they're not naive, and they're certainly not broken. What's actually happening is far more layered than any of those labels can hold. This is about the psychology of people who overcompromise in love and what's really driving that pattern beneath the surface. The word compromise carries an almost universally positive reputation. It sounds mature, balanced, adult, but there's a version of it that goes further than balance, past flexibility, past generosity, into a place where one person is consistently the one who gives, the one who adjusts, the one who quietly reforms their needs to fit the shape of someone else's preferences. And research in relationship psychology has a name for the internal experience that drives this. It's called self-silencing, and it's been documented extensively in how people manage emotional closeness. Jack, a psychologist who spent years studying this pattern, found that people who chronically self-silence in relationships don't do it out of indifference to their own needs. They do it because they've learned, somewhere along the way, that expressing those needs creates distance, conflict, or the very loss of connection they're trying to protect. The compromise isn't about not caring, it's about caring so much that the thought of rupture feels unbearable. And this, more often than not, traces back to something much earlier than the current relationship. The nervous system is remarkably adaptive. When a child grows up in an environment where love feels conditional, where affection is withdrawn after conflict, where a parent's mood determined the emotional temperature of an entire household, the child learns to read rooms. They learn to adjust. They learn that their own discomfort is a small price to pay for maintaining warmth. This isn't a conscious decision, it's a survival mechanism, shaped quietly and efficiently by a developing brain trying to stay safe within its first experience of love. Neuroscience shows us that the brain's threat detection system, the amygdala, doesn't distinguish between physical danger and social disconnection, especially in early life. Being rejected, being shut out, being the cause of someone's cold silence feels genuinely dangerous to a child's nervous system, so it learns to avoid triggering that response. It becomes fluent in appeasement. And years later, in an adult relationship, that same nervous system is still running the same program, still scanning for signs of disapproval, still quietly recalibrating to prevent the loss of warmth. This is not a character flaw, it's a learned architecture, and it made complete sense in the environment it was built for. None of this is to say that people who compromise differently, those who hold their ground more readily, who exit conversations rather than accommodate, are better at love. They're not. They're often running their own early adaptations, just in the opposite direction. The person who never compromises learned their own version of survival. Different nervous system response, different behavioral output. No version is more evolved than the other. They're just different maps drawn from different territories. But here's what rarely gets talked about, and it's worth sitting with. The very capacity that makes someone a chronic overcompromiser is often what makes them extraordinary at love. The attunement, the sensitivity, the deep and genuine investment in another person's emotional state, these aren't side effects of a dysfunction, they're real skills. They produce a kind of intimacy that many people genuinely long for. The cost, the part that creates the quiet exhaustion, is when those skills get applied without any reciprocity. When the attunement flows in only one direction for long enough, the person doing all the reading begins to disappear, slowly inside a relationship that was supposed to feel like home. The paradox is this: the behavior that was designed to protect connection ends up, over time, eroding the very sense of self that healthy connection requires. You cannot truly be known by another person if you've spent years hiding the parts of yourself that might cause friction.
And without being known, the intimacy, however warm on the surface, has a kind of hollowness to it that's hard to name but impossible to ignore. That feeling, that quiet sense of being close to someone and still somehow alone, is not a sign that love has failed, it's information. It's the nervous system beginning to register the cost of a pattern that once felt necessary. Understanding where this comes from doesn't dissolve it overnight, but it does something important. It removes the shame. Because this isn't about being too much or not enough. It's about a nervous system that learned to love through accommodation in a world that didn't always make it safe to love any other way. That origin story deserves compassion, not correction. If something in this felt like it was describing you more precisely than you expected, there may be more here worth exploring. The psychology of how early attachment shapes the way we move through adult love runs deeper than any single pattern, and understanding it, piece by piece, tends to feel less like being analyzed and more like finally being understood.